Hello and welcome to the Biological Resources Information Program for the Ione Road Bridges Replacement Project. This training is provided by Alluvian Biological Consulting. Now this training has four broad objectives. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll be familiar with all four of these points. First, we're going to cover the definition and implications of take. Then we'll move on to your responsibilities if you encounter a regulated species. We'll have a brief introduction to the protected species associated with this project, and then we'll go over some general mitigation measures that need to be followed in order to prevent any incidents of take. We'd like to emphasize that this training is meant to supplement, not replace, the training information handouts that you should have received before watching this video. If you have not received a training pamphlet or booklet, please request one from your supervisor or on-site alluvian biologist. Let's start by discussing take. Take is a broadly defined term, and under the Federal Endangered Species Act, take means to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, capture, collect, or attempt to engage in any such conduct. Now, penalties for take will vary from species to species. However, any individual found to be committing unsanctioned take may be dealt hefty fines, and in some cases up to a year in jail time. These penalties are assessed for each instance of unsanctioned take. So what should you do if you encounter a regulated species on the project? The first thing you should do is ensure that you do not touch or approach the animal. You should then immediately suspend work within the area the animal was found, especially if that work would result in take. Your next step is to notify your supervisor or the on-site biologist. If a biologist is not on site, please contact Peter Harmon at the number listed on this slide and in your training materials. Unless otherwise noted in this presentation, a 100-foot no-work buffer will need to be established around the species of concern until it either moves off the project site of its own volition or until permission is received from regulatory agencies to reduce or eliminate the no-work buffer. The next few slides will give you a brief overview of all of the listed and regulated species that occur on this project site. The Valley elderberry longhorn beetle is a 1-inch long dark beetle with green markings. The body is black with red wing coverings, while the forewings are dark metallic green with a bright reddish-orange border. The shell has numerous indentations that might resemble puncture marks. The body is elongated and usually cylindrical. Their color and strong association with elderberry shrubs distinguish this beetle from similar species. This species is completely dependent on the elderberry plant for both food and shelter, and it feeds on the stems and leaves of elderberry plants. Tricolored blackbird is a medium-sized passerine bird with a conical beak. Male breeding plumage is almost entirely black, but they also carry a distinctive red shoulder patch bordered by white fringe. This species is found throughout the Central Valley and a few coastal environments within and south of Sonoma County. Tricolored blackbirds can be found nesting in freshwater wetland vegetation as well as agricultural fields. Their diet consists primarily of insects and seeds. This species forms the largest nesting colonies of any passerine bird, with a 10-acre area containing between 50 to 20,000 nests. Nests are built in dense vegetation with plenty of cover. Breeding takes place from mid-April to late July, and females rear up to 2 broods of 4 chicks per nesting season. Incubation lasts up to 2 weeks, with another 2 weeks required for nestlings to fledge. If a breeding colony of tricolored blackbirds is found on the project site, a mandatory 300-foot no-work buffer will need to be established around this colony until it is deemed inactive. Roosting bats are protected by California Department of Fish and Wildlife Code 4150, and many of the habitats and structures associated with Caltrans right-of-ways have been found to be inhabited by bats. A total of 18 species of bats have been found to use bridges in California in one way or another. Roosts are places that provide security and protection where bats can rest, sleep, hibernate, mate, socialize, or feed. Roosts can take many forms and may be found in rock crevices, gaps in concrete or steel structures, trees, bridge weep holes, and many others. Bats prefer to roost in places that are in close proximity to their open foraging grounds. In many cases, you won't see bats in their roosts, but you will see traces of guano and bat droppings outside of these roost crevices, so this is something you should look out for on your job site. A variety of bird species have been found nesting in or immediately adjacent to Caltrans right-of-ways. Nest sites are often placed in crevices, cavities, seams, or weep holes within bridges. Other nests are constructed on open vertical cement surfaces on bridges. The species that utilize man-made structures as nest sites tend to be more tolerant of urban conditions, otherwise known as increased noise, light, vibration, and even human presence. But they can nonetheless be sufficiently disturbed during construction or maintenance activities to cause nest abandonment or inattentiveness, which would result in the death or loss of eggs or juveniles. Incubation and brood rearing require approximately 4 to 5 weeks for smaller birds, but can take up to 12 weeks for larger birds like raptors. Any active bird nests found within or adjacent to the project area will require a mandatory 100-foot no-work buffer until it can be confirmed that the chicks have fledged and left the nest. Any raptor nests will require a 500-foot no-work buffer. So now we're going to go over some of the species protection measures for this project. This won't be an exhaustive list of all of the species protection measures for this project, but just a summary of some of the important points. A full list of the species protection measures for this project can be found in your Biological Resources Information Program booklet, so please reference your booklet for the rest of those measures. There are several general protective measures that need to be followed on this project. I'll go over these quickly, but you should review these measures in your training materials. First of all wildlife should be allowed to leave the job site unharmed, and this includes any animals that don't carry state or federal protections. And to prevent wildlife entrapment on this project, all excavations, including trenches, holes, and pits, as well as all pipes and hoses, need to be covered at the end of each workday. If covering an excavation is not practical, then an earthen or wooden escape ramp should be constructed at each end of the excavation. Additionally, all food-related waste generated on the site needs to be contained in a sealed trash container and disposed of daily. Food waste tends to attract wildlife to a site, which could ultimately cause project delays. So the environmentally sensitive areas on this project should be clearly marked and fenced. No work is allowed in these areas, and if the ESA fencing is knocked down or damaged for any reason, it needs to be repaired immediately. And during construction operations, stockpiling of construction materials, portable equipment, vehicles, and supplies needs to be restricted to the designated construction staging areas. These areas must be located in upland habitat and may not cover riparian vegetation or leave material where it could be washed into a water body. Drip pans or absorbent material must be placed underneath all vehicles parked in these staging areas. There are a few protection measures that need to be followed in order to prevent unnecessary impacts to the aquatic and terrestrial habitats within the project boundaries. To protect aquatic habitats, best management practices, or BMPs, need to be employed in any instance where there is a risk of discharging sediment or hazardous materials into the soil or a nearby water body. All BMPs should be inspected immediately before and immediately after storms. BMPs may include any number of devices, including gravel bags, silt fence, and straw wattle. However, the use of monofilament netting is prohibited in all BMPs. Additionally, no equipment or construction materials should enter any part of the stream where flowing water is present. If any equipment is operated near the stream bank, it must be inspected for leaks and be in good working order. If work in the flowing stream is unavoidable, then appropriate dewatering procedures must be followed in order to prevent impacts to aquatic species and habitats. Now, in order to prevent terrestrial habitats within or adjacent to the project, certain restrictions have been placed on vegetation removal. Only trees with less than a 4-inch diameter at chest height are permitted to be damaged or removed. Additionally, all other vegetation removal should be restricted to the minimum necessary to complete the project. Excess vegetation removal should be avoided. We'll finish up here with some important takeaways from this presentation. Perhaps the most important takeaway is remembering what your responsibilities are if you see a regulated species within the project site. Don't touch or approach regulated wildlife and immediately report encounters to your supervisor or the on-site biologist. Keep your training materials somewhere where you can readily access them. If an animal wanders onto the construction site and you're unsure whether it's a cause for concern, your booklets contain the necessary contact information and procedures to follow in order to protect yourself and your company. It is important to remember that you and your company are wholly responsible for following the measures in this training video and its associated training materials, as well as the permits and specifications for this project. So please revisit this video and your training materials as needed. This concludes the Biological Resources Information Program training video. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions about what's been covered in this presentation or your training materials, please direct them to your on-site alluvian biologist.